I wish we had. Believe me, I would gladly spend a full class of my 13-week Habakkuk course talking about how to pronounce it, but because we're doing 1 week, we don't have time for that. Don't forget your important documents. See, I told you, these are highly intelligent people that are just walking right by them. I need to put the table, like, literally in front of the door. Good morning, everybody. So, I have 1 week to do this, enormous amount of material. I mean, this book, and really just in the first 2 chapters of the 3 chapters, I mean, it, like, covers, like, mammoth stuff. So, we'll see. We'll probably get to about the first 3 bullets. That'll how these things usually go. So, Habakkuk or Habakkuk or however you want to pronounce it, likely prophesied during the rise of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, which for shorthand I'm just going to call the Babylonian Empire. Starting around 620, 610 BC, the Babylonians began to replace the Assyrians as the dominant military/political force in the Middle East. Won some significant military victories around 605 BC, 597 BC, sacked Jerusalem, 586 BC, sacked Jerusalem again, destroy the temple, and basically terminate any sense of independence of the southern kingdom. So the Babylonians are the bad guys in this story, which is very important historically, and I love the Bible history as much as anybody, but in terms of sort of what we're talking about today and some larger issues, the point is the Babylonians are the bad guys. They're the enemies. They're the people besieging God's people. Okay, so this is really important, because I'll just get up here and talk and talk and talk and talk, and then you'll all be bored. So please interject. Raise hands is best, but if not, just yell things out. Because otherwise it'll be 45 minutes of me talking, and no one wants that, right? See, look, she turned away. Can someone read verses 2 through 4 of chapter 1? Quickly and efficiently.
I will.
Great.
How long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen, or cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore the law is paralyzed, and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous, so that justice is perverted.
Okay, so in a general sense, what is the prophet upset about? What is his complaint here?
Injustice within the nation of Israel.
Yeah, well, the kingdom of Judah, but I know what you mean. So technically the northern kingdom was Israel, and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom's gone by this point. Southern kingdom is Judah. But among God's people, there is this injustice going on. Anybody else? I'm totally down with that answer. Anybody else have any thoughts? So that is, that's not the micro answer. That's bigger than the micro answer. In an even larger sense, what's he complaining about? If we just had to say like one word, actually out of your whole answer, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I'm terribly sorry. I'm terrible.
Oh, I'm Heather.
Heather, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'll meet you like 17 more times and I'll still forget your name.
Sounds good.
So if you just had to pick one word out of your answer.
Injustice.
Very good. So in the most general sense, injustice. Why am I looking around and seeing all this injustice? Tony?
It's not fair.
Right. Well, why are the bad people doing well and the good people, are getting a raw deal? This doesn't seem like how it should work. Okay. It's very interesting, right? Because the prophet here is the only person who's ever asked this question, right? So I mean, this is something that I think I don't want to speak for anybody. This is something I struggle with, and I think many Christians struggle with. What is going on here? Why are horrible people doing well, and good people are having such a hard time. So this is a question asked. I don't read ancient Hebrew. The ancient Hebrew in this book is supposedly beautiful, beautifully written. The author was a educated, sophisticated man. But so this question is articulated in a specific time and place. It's apparently articulated beautifully. But this is a question that has been asked for ages and continues to be asked today. Tony?
I think we come back that God gave us the gift of seeing bigger than ourselves, and that's the problem we have.
That's a very interesting way to put it. Right. Well, okay, so I understand what you're saying, and I agree, and I think that's a very perceptive point. But in another sense, I think this mindset, which again, I'm a total participant in, so I'm not knocking it. This mindset comes from not seeing the big picture, or an inability to see the big picture. And in some fairness to us as people, God, we are incapable of seeing the big picture. We can't see the complete picture. And I think part of what I don't want to give away the end, but we need to trust the big picture even though we can't see all of it. Can't even see most of it. Gave away the end. And I'll go. Thank you. It's been great. Go ahead.
We are like a fly on a big picture, sitting there and seeing just what's around us. It's left and right, we can't see.
And the picture is actually enormous, right? So
And over time, too.
Fourth dimension. Absolutely. So trust. So let me ask you a question. I don't know that the prophet is really raging at God here, but he is posing a pointed question to God. How does this make us feel? Anybody uncomfortable about this?
No, not really.
Everybody's all right?
Speaks out of my heart.
Okay. I think that sometimes some Christians are uncomfortable. Look, this is in the Bible, so this is okay. Stamp of approval, and that's true. I'm not. But I think when this isn't in the Bible, and sometimes people speak this way, and sort of talk to God, question what's going on. I think sometimes some Christians get a bit. I'm not sure about that. And I understand why, because at the end of the day, right, I've already given away the end of the lesson, we need to trust God, we need to trust the big picture. So I get that. But I don't think that if your heart is coming from the right place, there's anything wrong with asking this sort of question. And to give away the next bullet, it doesn't seem to bother God. God, with people with honest hearts, God engages Jonah the same way, right? David. I don't think that this is asked this way with this kind of heart. I don't think this question bothers God. Now, at some point, like with Job, God may just say, "Listen, shut up. Here's what it is." Fine, but I don't think posing the question in this manner is problematic to God. Again, as long as the heart is in the right place. Does anyone like the movie The Apostle with Robert Duvall? Myron raises his hand. These four are way too young to even know what I'm talking about. Andrew, there's several young people who are like, what? So The Apostle is a movie starring Robert Duvall. It's one of like the very, very, very few semi-major Hollywood movies made in the last 30 years that actually takes Christianity seriously. Some Christians like it, some don't, but it's about a very fiery minister down in Louisiana, and he often locks himself in his room and talks to God in a he has emotional exchanges with God. I love this movie, and check it out if you want. But this sort of reminded me of that. Myra, what do you think of that analogy?
That works.
All right, thank you. Okay.
We need that approval.
I do. I need constant validation.
Just a question.
Okay, so can someone read verses 5 through 11, which is God's response? Don't raise your hand, son. Just go ahead.
Look at the nations and watch.
Loudly.
Look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. For I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe even if you were told. I am raising up the Babylonians, that ruthless and impetuous people, who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwelling places not their own. They are a feared and dreaded people. They are a law to themselves and promote their own honor. Their horses are swifter than leopards, fiercer than wolves at dusk. Their cavalry gallops headlong, their horsemen come from afar. They fly like a vulture swooping to devour. They all come bent on violence. Their hordes advance like a desert wind and gather prisoners like sand. They deride kings and scoff at rulers. They laugh at all fortified cities. They build earthen ramps and capture them. Then they sweep past like the wind and go on. Guilty men whose own strength is their God.
Okay, so again, to oversimplify things, Habakkuk says, God, I look around Jerusalem and I see injustice. I see, people taking advantage of people, evil men prospering, righteous men suffering, and this seems unfair to me, God. What are you going to do about it? And God responds here, what is, again, we look back. We have the benefit of hindsight, so we know that, what happened. But from Habakkuk's perspective, what is literally shocking about this response? Instead of saying, yeah, I'm going to take care of it, what does God say?
He went the same way he was going.
What's that?
He went the same way he was going. You don't even understand it yet.
Okay, but micro it down for me a little bit. Like, what does he say? How's he going to deal with this problem?
I got the Babylonians. They're gonna take everything out.
You know these savage pagans who you've been hearing about running amok over everybody? Whose army just crushed the Egyptians? Right? You heard about them? Okay, that's our solution. Okay, great. Right? I mean, this is, I suspect, not the answer that the prophet was looking for or expecting. Because God's answer is, and again, I hate to distill scripture down, and you just heard the text itself, but God's answer is, I'm going to take care of this. The Babylonians are going to be my tool of choice. Yikes. Right? So, like the Assyrians before them, the Babylonians, and in fairness, unlike the Persians who are going to come next, the Babylonians, I mean, this is terror campaign stuff. Besiege a city, surrender immediately, and maybe we won't kill everybody. Put up a fight, heads are going to roll. Literally. Deportations, mass executions, advanced weapons of mobile warfare in terms of things like higher tech chariots and stuff like that. This is the scourge of God coming, and God is saying, this is what I'm going to use as my tool. So again, we've kind of answered these questions, but what do we make of this? What do we make of what God says here?
Well, I mean, for me, in the culture that we live in today, it's very hard to accept the concept of fighting violence with violence.
Okay. That's fair enough.
I think our response is like,
I'm terribly sorry.
I'm Stephen.
Stephen.
It's kind of like Habakkuk's response. I guess we'll read in a minute. It's like, God, that's not better. Like, I mean, if it was like we were praying about, immorality here, and he was like, well, I'm gonna have Russia come and nuke half the place. We would be like, no, like that was
Right.
that was wrong.
Or I really feel there's great cultural decline in my city. You know what? Hugh Hefner's going to be the next mayor. That's how we're going to fix that. Right. But so, and again, with the benefit of hindsight and the benefit of having the whole Bible, what do we have to take from this sort of instruction from God? Trust,
Yeah.
faith, right? Because this would not have been our plan. It would not have been the prophet's plan. I doubt it would have been the plan of anyone living in the kingdom of Judah in 605 BC to say, let's deal with our own not so nice people by having the Babylonians come in and sack the city and destroy the temple. So this is God telling what's going to happen, and did happen, but it's also a message to us about our need to trust. And to trust when the message we get seems really, really hard to understand. Tony.
Also, remember, at the same time, Jeremiah is in the city of Jerusalem saying, you have to surrender, you have to surrender. He's preaching this every day, and it's like nobody's listening to it.
Yeah. So Jeremiah is a contemporary of Habakkuk. I like to take the Bible and make historical order out of it, and which prophets are preaching at the same time, and then people tend to roll their eyes at me and say, you're missing the larger picture, and this isn't a history lesson, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And some of those criticisms of the way I like to sort of think about things is certainly true, but it's a great point. It's worth noting, right? These things aren't, every book of the Bible isn't some independent thing that's just floating out there. At the same time that Habakkuk is preaching this oracle, Jeremiah is, as Tony just said, in the city preaching about what's coming as well, and no one's listening. Anybody else have any thoughts before we move on? Okay. Can someone read verses 12 to 17, where Habakkuk takes up the conversation again? And I think it's fair to call it a conversation. Yep, go ahead.
O Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, we will not die. O Lord, you have appointed them to execute judgment. O Rock, you have ordained them to punish. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrong. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? You have made men like fish in the sea, like sea creatures that have no ruler. The wicked foe pulls all of them up with hooks. He catches them in his net. He gathers them up in his dragnet, and so he rejoices and is glad. Therefore he sacrifices to his net and burns incense to his dragnet. For by his net he lives in luxury and enjoys the choicest food. Is he to keep on emptying his net, destroying nations without mercy? I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me and what answer I am to give to this complaint.
And could you just reread just verse 13, which I think is just an amazing piece of scripture.
Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrong. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves?
Thank you. So, in this one verse, and of course he didn't write it as verse 13, so it would just be this one segment of the oracle to him, but what we call verse 13, in this one couple of lines, he asks these mammoth questions, and obviously we're not going to completely get the answers to all these questions, but and the answers to some of these questions are, you've got to trust, which can be an unsatisfactory answer until you kind of see as much of the picture as you can possibly see. In my opinion, we only get a very small piece of the picture, but we're given enough that our faith, that our trust has a basis. And I know there's people who say, well, your faith doesn't even need to have that. Your faith is just faith. In fact, if you need something to base it on, it's not even real faith, blah, 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 blah. I'm a very logical thinker. I came to be a Christian, what I consider to be logical analysis. And sometimes people say, well, that's something wrong with you. You should have had this faith experience. And I've had some faith experiences, I think. But to me, it's not all there. It's not all there for us to see, but enough is there that we can have this trust. But still, that trust, it can be difficult when God is telling you that I am going to use as my agent of change the Babylonians, or whatever our contemporary analogy is. So, the prophet says, your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. And we know how God feels about sin. So, the first two sub-bullets that I have indented there. How can our perfect God tolerate sin? And seemingly more problematically, how can our perfect God use a force of evil like the Babylonians to move his plan forward? I realize this is sweeping stuff for, it's not even 10 o'clock. But does anyone have thoughts on this? Tony?
A couple of weeks ago, we had a guy did insulation in our house, and he was leaving on Saturday of last week. He said, oh, you're a preacher. He found I was a preacher. I was just saying goodbye to him. He said, well, I used to be an atheist. He said, but then I got to be an agnostic. Then I got older, and I'm going to this Baptist church up north where I've been converted. And I said, well, that's a good journey. I said, do they believe the Bible? And he said, yes, they do. I said, believe in that, and God bless you. And I could say that and not indoctrinate everything he believes, but point him in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And this is what we have to go. Is God's pointing the right direction, or are we looking?
Okay. And I agree. But what do we do? How do we process it when we have an example like this where God's direction seems difficult for us to understand? And by the way, sometimes you'll get, well, this was the only way that God could move his plan forward. The only way that God could do this. No, never. Never. Not any examples.
No.
Was there ever anything where it was the only way God could do it? God's not restricted by that. Now, best ways? Ways that help us the most? Sure. Most loving ways? Sure. But the only way? No. This wasn't the only way that God could have chastened Judah. It wasn't. It was the way that was chosen. Anyone else have any thoughts before I move along?
I mean, if you look at what Habakkuk is, now you got me saying it.
Gotcha.
You got me saying it. Habakkuk is saying, complaining about, there's all this injustice and evil people are, hoarding over the good people, basically. And, why are all the wicked people getting all the good things? And so God is using evil people, or maybe eviler people, to put those people in a humble position and say, this is what you've been doing to all these people for a long time. And, God uses evil for good, even the evil decisions we make, he turns into good.
Except that even the righteous people in Jerusalem are going to get swept away with the Babylonians. It's not like they're going to come in like, the angel of justice and say, okay, you've been ripping people off in the market, you've been hypocritical in your life, and you folks have been righteous, you get to leave. The Babylonians are going to come in, right? They're not going to discern. So look, the Old Testament, which I assume most of you have read at least most of, is, well, it's a zillion things. But one of the things that it is for a long time is God telling his people, from the moment they leave Egypt until the end of the book, to the end of what we call the Old Testament, the end of the last book, the end of Malachi, is God telling his chosen people, the Israelites, to get back on the right track, and them going in fits and starts between the right track and the wrong track, and spending a lot more time over here on the wrong tracks than they are on the right tracks. And God is constantly using different rods to steer them back here. And this is one of them. The Babylonians are one of them. They're not the first and they're not the last. I mean, the Assyrians come before them, and the Persians come after them, and those are just the big empires. There's lots of smaller rods. So that's what's happening here. And for us to say, well, gosh, couldn't this have been done in a nicer way? You know, a puppet show or something? Or I can't answer that definitively. I can tell you that this is not the first time Jeremiah's preaching in the streets of Jerusalem around this time is not the first time God has told his chosen people, you need to get back on the right track. It's happened again and again and again and again, and a great many of them, most of them, are spending a lot of the time here. This has become the wrong side of things. And this is, why the Babylonians? Beyond me. But this is God's rod, his chastening rod at this point in history. And when we ask, my gosh, it seems hard to process the level of violence that we know occurred at this point in time when the Babylonians sacked Jerusalem twice within 11 years. That seems hard for us to process. Well, yes, but too bad. Because that was the way that God chastened his people. And I know we all know this. I'm not suggesting anyone doesn't agree with this. That's a perfect decision. It is. Now let me ask you this. And I'll give away another game right out front. I'm the biggest free will guy you're going to ever find. So there's a spectrum. We'll make another spectrum. We'll get rid of the Israelites being good and deviant. New spectrum. Free will guys, Calvinists are down at the other end here. Like I'm here. This is me, for better or for worse. So I'm just giving that away so if you have a different perspective, if you're more to the middle, or you're down here, you know where I'm coming from. But if God is using the Babylonians here in this way, does that mean the Babylonians are just marionettes? Mindless automatons? Fulfilling the role of, say, locusts or something like that?
The robots.
They're robots. What do we think? Do the Babylonians have free will? I see some heads nodding. Somebody want to speak to this point?
So first he's saying, in Habakkuk's complaint, he's saying, look, these guys are going to come in and they're going to sack all these things, and then they're going to go worship their own gods and themselves because of it. And then later God's like, yeah, and I'm going to punish them for that.
And what does that tell
they're
you?
making their own decisions, and they're going to be responsible for them as well.
Yes. Well stated. Myron.
The passage that for me comes to mind when I'm thinking about these kind of things is when Jesus coming into the city and the elders are saying, tell your people to be quiet. And he says, I can tell them to be quiet, but then the rocks will sing. I mean, God's purposes will be fulfilled. He's not forcing them to do that, but if that's what they're going to do, I'm going to use it.
Okay.
You see the decisions and consequences of the decisions in Esther and Daniel for Babylon and Persia. So they clearly are they're responsible for their decisions too.
Did you have anything to add? Okay. All right, Tony.
Nebuchadnezzar, one of the leaders of all this,
Is the king at this point, and would be the king for some time.
God got into his life and dealt with him directly. So it's not like they're somewhere out there, part of his creation.
Okay, so I agree with everything that everybody just said. I think I do. It seems to make sense, but here's the problem. I'm a very smart person. I think very highly of myself. I can tell you about how smart I am for a while if you'd like me to. And I can't really figure out how to, over the course of time and space and worldwide geography, plot this all out so that I can envision people's moral choices and then plot it all out to forward my plan. That seems too much for me. I'm being sarcastic. I hope some of you get this. The point being, right, is that's something that seems incomprehensible to us. To take from the beginning of history till the end, to take everybody, to see them, to not control their moral choices, but to see all those moral choices and use them all those independent free will decisions, and all the ones that riff off of all of those decisions, and all the riffs that riff off of all the riffs, and to plot them all out across not just the whole world, but the whole expanse of time. This is a really good part of the speech. I'm just kidding with you. You yawn. Just kidding. Just joking. To do that is, that's incomprehensible to us. We can't even think about, what are you even talking about? But to God, it's nothing. It's a snap. So the whole idea of, oh my goodness, I can't understand how anyone could, map all this out in the way that God does. And, like Myron said, in this way of using across time and space all of these choices to forward his plan. I can't comprehend that. Well, you don't need to comprehend that. This is what I need to comprehend. I need to comprehend that for God, it's no problem at all. No problem at all. Somebody say, oh, well, that's a really big task. That one probably made God sweat. No. Really, really easy, actually. Okay. All right. Okay. I think I get it. But here's the problem, and we've already touched upon it a few times. The Babylonians sweep in, and yes, we're getting ahead of ourselves, because in chapter 2 God says the Babylonians are going to be laid low eventually. And they will. They are. Of course God's promise comes true. But eventually, and in the interim, the righteous men and women who are in Judah are going to go through a heck of a time. Which isn't the word I would use if I wasn't in church. They're going to go through a bad time. And there are going to be Babylonian overlords and generals and soldiers who prosper from this. They're going to loot the city. They're going to raise the temple to the ground. And I suspect they took whatever was valuable there, and I don't suspect they donated it to charity. So at least for some time, including the lifespan of some people's lives, the wicked are going to prosper and the righteous are going to suffer. So, getting choked up. So, I'm not going to ask you, because it's not fair, to assess that from the position, excuse me, of someone living in Jerusalem in 586 BC. My son is laughing at me because my family makes fun of me as I get older and I'm more decrepit and fall apart. Whenever I start ranting about something, I start choking. It's just, I'm like old. So he's laughing at me because I guess I was getting kind of worked up and now I'm choking. That's what's going on there. But from our perspective, as Christians, who have the benefit not just of having the whole Bible, but have the unbelievably wonderful benefit of the life teachings, death, and resurrection of Jesus. How can we process this? Because, you know, even Christians, even real solid Christians, and they may deny, they don't like this. They, you know, there's some awful person doing really well. I think I've mentioned this before. I once gave a message in a different church. It was entitled, Hugh Hefner is Happy. Man, did that make people angry. I mean, really angry. And my point was, you know, we like to say that when people lead sinful lives, like, it wrecks their life. And maybe it does. Maybe Hugh Hefner was really empty inside and sad. Maybe he was. But it's not how he looked. He looked rich and happy. Now, the end game for Hugh Hefner, as far as I can tell, I don't know, maybe he had some last moment conversion, but that aside, the end game's not going to be good at all. But in an earthly sense, he appeared to prosper. And there are plenty of really good people. You know, there's some guy in North Korea right now who's going to get shot tomorrow for being a Christian. Like, how? So as Christians here today, with the benefit of the Bible, with the benefit of Jesus, how can we process this? Matthew?
Well, I mean, Hugh Hefner lived, 90-something years, and then, but like, Jesus' judgment is eternal. Like, 90 years is nothing compared to that. Like, his prospering was meaningless in comparison to what eternity is going to be like for him.
And flip that on its head from a more positive perspective.
For the person in North Korea, they're going to be in a great, like, they're going to go to heaven. I mean, and that will make all their suffering worth it. Like,
Tony? Well,
I think,
easy for you to say, but I understand your point.
I think his point. The problem is, one of the gifts God gave us is time. And you got to go to that, or you don't answer this question right. God said, shall we make man in our image? And then he did. And the right time, he sent his Spirit, which was after Christ. And he wants us to see his wisdom is for us to be like Habakkuk. Ask him, why this? And let us see that we're in a relationship with him. We're not independent, separate. We're all together with Christ, unified in his gift and his relationship he created in us.
Very well stated. Anybody else? Look. Yes?
Yeah, I think, like,
if you can't raise your hand, just raise the hand.
Right. I think Jesus' suffering comes into this too, that, you know, there's like this, like, throughout this question of, like, why does there have to be suffering, and why does it, and, you know, and God doesn't give a straight up answer, but just except to say, oh, like, I suffer too, and so that's part of
it. And Jesus' suffering, of course, is completely unearned. And yeah, I'm not saying that anyone else's suffering is earned, but it's different.
Yeah.
The rest of us have some level of train wreck of lives filled with sin, which at least to some level brings stuff down on us. Jesus, of course, took all our sins upon himself when he didn't need to. So that's a great point. So, you know, listen, this is going to be one of these, like, preachy moments, and you'll be like, well, who are you? Well, let me tell you who I am. I almost guarantee you, literally, I almost guarantee you I'm worse about this than all of you. So I'm not preaching, I'm preaching to myself. I bet you're all better than me about this sort of stuff. But we need to believe what we believe when we look at this question. Right? Because we would all, if we were given a little test and check boxes, we'd all check off the right answers about heaven and the value of eternity versus the value of comfort on this world. We'd all check off the right boxes about, Myron, there's got to be at least like an hour left, so don't be ringing bells. We'd all check off the right boxes about, you know, the value of, you know, understanding sort of C.S. Lewis's analogy that as many treasures as you could have in this life. They're trinkets, they're plastic nothings compared to the glory of heaven. And I think we all spiritually understand it. I don't think it's just some intellectual exercise for us. But man, is it hard to live sometimes. It just is. And you know what? I think that's okay to some degree. You love people. That's a good thing. You don't want to see them in pain. That's a good thing. You don't want to see yourself in pain. That's a good thing. But we need also to really live what we believe, to really believe what we believe, to walk the walk the whole way through. Our understanding of the value of eternity versus the value of anything we're going to get here, gotta live it. I hope to goodness that I'm never asked to make the starkest choices that some people are. And I hope my kids never have to. But if I ever am, if they ever are, I hope that they make the right choices. And if some sort of tragedy befalls us, and I pray that it doesn't, but if it does, I hope we all understand that we have a loving, righteous God who in the long run is going to take care of us, and take care of us doesn't even begin to describe what he's going to do for us because of our faith, trust, and obedience in Jesus. All right, so we made it about halfway, which is better than I thought we would do, and honestly, I think we sort of covered most of the larger points that I wanted to cover. So I've got about 2 or 3 minutes left. Let me ask a question, and this question's a little bit tangential to what we've been talking about most of the way. But I hear talking about righteous people, the good people in Judah, the wicked Babylonians, and da-da-da-da-da. So, my last sub-bullet there, are there righteous people? Are there wicked people? Are those actual things? Or are we all just wicked sinners? I mean, there is certainly scripture from which to argue that, no one's righteous. Is that the end of that conversation? And if that's your view, no problem. Again, it's not. No one's gonna step into this one. Oh.
Some people are not righteous, but they are doing righteous things, and some doing only wrong things. Maybe not always, but a lot of times.
Okay.
We have to ask ourselves: does a little sin hurts Jesus more than a big sin?
Well, that's a question. I'm going to duck that one. I mean, because every sin obviously separates us from God. Every sin needs Jesus' blood to redeem us. So in some sense, they have to all be equal. But I keep having this but. But Matthew, did you have a thought?
Well, I mean, there's going to be a judgment to separate the righteous from the wicked.
Well, I believe that. Saying it that overtly might get you in trouble in some places, but I agree with you. Tony?
I think the Bible teaches...
Excuse me 1 second. That is also something that the Bible says. Go ahead.
Righteousness builds humanity, because that's the work of God. Now, it doesn't matter what you do individually. You might be a sinner, but if you do the right all the time, you build the community, but it's not who you are.
So I'll end on a note that some people may disagree with, and if you choose to take me out in the parking lot and stone me to death, it won't be the first time. It will be the first time I'm stoned to death. The Bible is a complicated book, and there are no contradictions in Scripture. I'm very comfortable with that statement. But there are things that take more processing than, okay, here's the line that supports my point of view, that's the end of it. So it is undeniably true that every sin separates us from God. That every sin, no matter how minor, requires Christ's sacrifice to redeem. Those are truths. And in that sense, and it's a very real sense, I don't say that in that sense like it's some good. In that sense, it is true that no one is righteous, not one. But it is also a biblical truth, a truth that God speaks in Scripture many, many, many times about the righteous and the wicked. And we could have a 13-week course easily on what that means, okay? But it happens too much in Scripture to mean nothing. So, I believe that you know, and again, this is probably not something to start with 3 minutes left in the class. It's probably the lesson here. But I want you to take away, even if you don't agree with everything that you think I'm saying, it's a biblical truth that God talks about the righteous and the wicked a lot. A lot. And it's not just in the Old Testament. You know, the language that Jesus uses when he talks about the separation of the sheep and the goats is the same language. Separation of the righteous and the wicked. Again, we have to process in the things I talked about at the start of this conversation into that too. I get it. It's not as simple as good, bad, good, bad. I get it. But this is also a biblical concept. The biblical concept of the righteous and the wicked. It's not my idea. It's a biblical idea. All right, I know we're out of time. I'm a big believer in starting on time and ending on time. So, and I do think we covered. I do think we covered most of what I wanted to cover. Just the second to last bullet, I note that God doesn't make kind of a corresponding promise of, you know, hey, Habakkuk, you and Jeremiah and the other good folks, everything's going to be okay for you here on earth. There's no such promise. And again, there's no such promise to us. I pray for myself and all of you that things go swimmingly the whole rest of our journeys here. But that's not what's promised to us. We know what's promised to us. We put our faith, trust, and obedience in Jesus. We're with God forever in eternity. That outweighs everything else by so much that outweighs doesn't even make sense as the word there. That's our promise. That's our promise. And that's what we have to trust in. And there is, in my opinion, there is enough in Scripture that promise doesn't have to just be some emotional faith reaction. And I'm not knocking emotional faith reactions. You should have them both. But there is evidence of it as well. If you have any other questions about the rest of the bullets, feel free to call me, email me, whatever else. But 2 minutes over, most of the way down the sheet, not bad. Appreciated the wonderful questions and thoughts. Really good stuff. It is editorial comment. Maybe I'll get reprimanded for it, who knows. There are strengths and weaknesses to being in a mega church. There are strengths and weaknesses to being in a smaller church. One of the real positives, I think, in a church like this is when we do a class like this, not just about, everybody here is serious and sort of participating and genuinely contributing, and that's really, really nice. So, God bless. Have a great day, everybody. Habakkuk. You say yours?
Habakkuk.
Myron goes with Habakkuk too, right?
Yep.
So, next class will be about the pronunciation. Have a good day, everybody.